Welcome to the Hindu Daily. We're jumping right into the editorial section today. And first up, we've got a really important deep dive into India's monetary policy, specifically the Flexible Inflation Targeting Framework, or FIT.
That's right. And this is timely because the whole framework, the one that mandates inflation, stays at 4%, give or take 2%. It's actually up for review pretty soon.
Before it expires in March 2026.
Exactly. So there's a lot of debate happening right now.
So let's start with the basics. Why is controlling inflation so critical? It feels like an abstract economic number sometimes.
Well, it's really not abstract at all. The core thing for you to understand is that high inflation is what economists call a regressive consumption tax.
A regressive tax, meaning it hurts the poor the most.
Precisely. Poor households can't hedge their incomes. They don't have assets that appreciate with inflation. It just eats away their purchasing power. And it also, misdirects investment in the broader economy.
And that 4% number wasn't just picked out of thin air, was it?
No, not at all. The Chakravarti Committee suggested 4% is that sort of acceptable level, the sweet spot, way back.
Okay, so this brings us to a huge debate in policy circles. Headline versus core inflation. What's the argument here?
The argument in the source material is very strongly in favor of targeting headline inflation.
Which includes food and fuel prices, the really volatile stuff.
Yes. And the reason is simple. If your goal is to protect the poor, you have to focus on the prices that affect them the most directly, which are food and fuel. You can't just strip them out and pretend they don't matter.
But isn't the counter-argument that food inflation is all about supply shocks? A bad monsoon or something, which monetary policy can't fix.
That's the conventional wisdom, but this analysis really pushes back on that. It makes the point that food inflation is not just a supply-side problem.
How so?
If you have a really expansionary monetary policy, if you're pumping a lot of money into the system, that liquidity absolutely makes food price spikes worse. It adds fuel to the fire.
That sounds familiar. It reminds me of Milton Friedman.
You nailed it. Friedman made this point back in 1963. He said the general price level can't rise without an expansion in the money supply. Full stop.
So too much money chasing too few goods.
It's the classic story. And the Indian data shows these dangerous second-round impacts. Food inflation starts pushing up wage demands, and if there's enough aggregate demand in the economy, that wage pressure then feeds into the general price level.
So it spirals.
It can spiral. And that's why the argument is that monetary policy must keep food inflation in its scope. It can't just ignore it.
What about the growth trade-off, then? The idea that a little more inflation might be worth it for higher growth? The Phillips curve?
Well, the Phillips curve trade-off is often very short run, if it exists at all in the long term. The source is clear. High inflation eventually hurts growth. It destroys credibility.
Is there a tipping point?
The data suggests there is. Post-1991, there seems to be an inflection point right around 3.98% inflation. And preliminary simulations looking out to 2030-31 suggest that the acceptable rate should actually stay below 4%.
So the argument for raising the target doesn't really hold up.
Not according to this analysis, no. And one last critical piece here is the link to fiscal policy.
The government's own spending and borrowing.
Exactly. FET, this inflation targeting, it can only work if it's coordinated with the fiscal responsibility and budget management rules, the FRBM provisions.
To keep the government's deficit in check.
Yes. Because if FRBM slips, you risk going back to what we saw in the 70s and 80s, the monetization of the fiscal deficit.
Where the central bank is essentially just printing money to pay the government's bills.
And that is a recipe for disaster. It completely undermines any attempt to control inflation.
Okay, from a systemic threat to the economy, we're now shifting to a huge systemic threat to an ecosystem, the Great Nicobar project. This is a massive one.
It is. We're talking about a 92,000 crore rupee mega project. A port, an airport, a power plant, the works.
And the central issue seems to be a massive contradiction coming from the Environment Ministry itself.
It's astounding, really. The ministry has admitted, before the National Green Tribunal, the NGT, that this project will have a significant impact. That's their own wording.
And this isn't some vague, undefined impact. They know exactly what's at stake.
They know precisely. The site for the port, Galathea Bay, it's ecologically priceless. You have over 20,000 live coral colonies there.
Wow.
Over 50 nesting mounds of the Nicobar megapode, which is an endemic bird, a Schedule I species. Maximum protection. And it's a major nesting site for the giant leatherback turtle.
And we have recent data on that, right?
Very recent. Forest Department data from just this year, 2024, confirms over 600 leatherback nestings. This is a thriving, critical habitat.
So to even get this project off the ground, they had to dismantle existing legal protections.
And that's where you see the procedural knots. The National Board for Wildlife had to denotify the Galathea Bay Wildlife Sanctuary.
A sanctuary that was set up in 1997 specifically to protect this area?
Yes. An institution was basically forced to go against its own reason for being.
Yeah.
It's a profound contradiction.
And then there's the whole coastal regulation zone issue. CRZ. That should have stopped a port from ever being considered, right?
It should have. The area clearly qualifies as CRZ-1A. That's the highest level of protection. It explicitly prohibits projects like ports. An NGT order even noted this fact in April 2023.
But something changed.
Something changed. A confidential report, which was commissioned by a high-powered committee from the ministry itself, came out later and concluded that, get this, no part of the project fell under CRZ-1A.
That is convenient.
It's incredibly convenient. It allowed them to downgrade the area to CRZ-1B and let the project proceed.
So how can you square that? A confidential report says there's no issue, but the ministry's own public admission to the NGT confirms the site's immense ecological importance.
You can't square it. It raises very serious questions about the scientific integrity of these assessments. It looks like the outcome was decided first, and the science was made to fit. It sets a terrifying precedent.
Okay, let's shift gears to our FAQ section now. We're starting with global health and a disease that's been a long-standing battle for India. Tuberculosis.
Yes, TB. It's still one of the world's deadliest infections. Over 10 million people affected globally this year alone.
And India's share of that is huge.
It is. India accounts for about 25% of the entire global patient load, a quarter of all cases.
But there has been progress.
Oh, absolutely. The progress is real. India's incidence rate has fallen by 21% since 2015. That's double the global rate of decline. And treatment coverage is very high, around 92%.
But we still missed the big target, the goal to eliminate TB by 2025.
We did. The goal was incredibly ambitious, and the challenges are just fundamental. You have a very high burden of drug-resistant TB, which is much harder to treat.
And structural issues, too.
Yes, weak health infrastructure, especially in rural areas, socioeconomic disparities, social stigma, it all plays a part.
And then there's a very practical, very urgent problem highlighted in the report.
The drug stockouts. This is a critical point for you, the listener, to understand. There have been serious supply chain disruptions.
So patients just aren't getting their medicine.
Exactly. In several states, there have been stockouts of anti-TB drugs, forcing patients to skip doses. And skipping doses is the single fastest way to develop drug resistance. It threatens to undo all the progress we've made.
So what's the strategy to fight back on such a massive scale?
It's a really comprehensive approach. Extensive screening, for one. They've also built the world's largest TB lab network, over 9,000 rapid molecular testing facilities.
And bringing care closer to home?
That's key. Decentralizing care through nearly 1.8 lakh Ayushman Arogya Mandirs. And they've also doubled nutritional support to 1,000 rupees a month, acknowledging that you can't fight TB if you're malnourished.
Moving from health infrastructure to aviation infrastructure. Let's talk about that massive technical glitch at Delhi's IGI airport, a 24-hour disruption.
Yes. This was a failure in the automatic message switching system, the AMSS. And it really exposed just how much we rely on some of these legacy systems at our busiest airports.
So for anyone listening, what does this AMSS system actually do? Why is it so important?
Think of it as the core communication backbone for air traffic control. It's a digital traffic controller for all the data.
So flight plans, weather updates?
All of it. Flight plans, meteorological data, NOTAMs, which are notices to air missions, and all the crucial coordination messages that go between different ATC centers and airlines.
So when it failed, the controllers were flying blind, metaphorically.
They were. They lost their automated feed and had to manually handle over 2,500 aircraft movements that day. It was a monumental task. Over 500 flights were affected.
And the cause was a technical failure between the servers.
A synchronization failure, yes,
Yeah.
between the primary and the standby servers. The switchover was delayed, and the message queues got corrupted. It points directly to the fragility of these older systems under immense pressure.
And this wasn't an unknown risk.
Far from it. A parliamentary standing committee flagged this just last year. They noted significant performance degradation in existing ATC systems and warned it was placing enormous additional cognitive strain on the controllers.
So what's the plan now?
The Airports Authority of India is already moving to install a new Pan-India system, an AMHS, to replace these old ones. The goal is a modern, integrated, cloud-supported system.
Well, speaking of risks and cognitive strain on pilots, we have to talk about GNSS spoofing. This has become a huge issue over Delhi.
It's a really sophisticated and frankly scary threat. GPS spoofing is when someone broadcasts fake GPS signals to trick a plane's navigation system.
And this is happening over one of the world's busiest airspaces.
Yes, it used to be something you'd see mostly in conflict zones, but now pilots over Delhi are getting erroneous navigation data, false position reports, even false terrain warning.
I mean, planes have backup systems, right?
They do, things like the inertial reference system, so it doesn't mean immediate danger of a crash, but what it does is dramatically increase the pilot's workload.
They're being flooded with false alarms.
Exactly. Creates confusion, reduces their situational awareness, especially during critical phases like approach and landing. It's incredibly dangerous.
What's really shocking here is the sheer scale of this problem.
The scale is escalating rapidly. The OPS group, which tracks these things, says incidents have soared globally since late 2023, but Delhi has become one of the top 10 global hotspots.
And the number is just staggering.
It is. You really need to hear this. In a single one-month period this year, from mid-July to mid-August, 41,000 flights experienced spoofing over this region.
41,000 in a month. That's not a glitch. That's a coordinated attack on the system. What's being done?
The government has formed a probe committee under the National Security Council Secretariat, and the DGCA, the aviation regulator, has issued a much stricter reporting protocol.
So pilots have to report it immediately.
Within 10 minutes. The goal is to collect data rapidly to try and pinpoint the source of the jamming.
But beyond just reporting, how do you actually stop this?
Well, IATA, the international airline body, is proposing a multi-pronged approach. Better cross-border cooperation for one, much stricter regulation on the sale of these jamming devices, but the real long-term fix is on the tech side.
Better equipment.
Exactly. Pushing avionics manufacturers to develop more resilient GNSS receivers that can detect and reject fake signals.
Okay, let's switch from high-tech threats to the beautiful mathematics of nature. We're moving to the science section and a story about how animals get their patterns.
Yes, like the sharp, crisp spots on a leopard. And for decades, the foundation for understanding this was Alan Turing's work from the 1950s.
The famous Turing patterns. Yeah. But there was always a problem with his model, wasn't there?
There was. His theory was brilliant. It suggested patterns emerged from chemicals or morphogens, diffusing and inhibiting each other. But whenever you ran the classic simulations, the patterns came out.
Well, blurry.
They didn't have the sharp edges we see in nature. So what's the new piece of the puzzle? A new study has identified two really critical factors that Turing's model was missing. The first is a physical phenomenon called diffusiophoresis.
Okay, that's a new one for me.
It basically means that the suspended particles, in this case the pigment-producing cells, physically attract each other and plump together, almost like tiny magnets.
So it's not just a chemical reaction. There's a physical clumping that confines the pigment and creates that sharp edge.
Precisely. It solves the blurriness problem. But then you have another issue.
The patterns are too perfect.
Exactly. Nature is messy.
Right.
A leopard's spots aren't perfectly uniform circles. And this is where the second, and I think more fascinating insight comes in. The researchers introduced varied sizes for the cells in their simulation.
So not all cells are the same size.
Right. When all the cells were uniform, the patterns were mathematically flawless. But when they introduced variation, some larger cells, some smaller, that's when the magic happened.
So imperfection is the key ingredient for realism.
It is. The larger cells physically can't fit into the ideal spots dictated by the chemical pattern. They bump into each other, they get crowded out. This physical friction creates the irregular, coarse, and fragmented clumps that look so much more natural.
So the chaos is introduced by the simple mechanical reality of cell sizes. That's an amazing connection.
It really is. And the study notes that even though their model is still simple, it treats cells just as hard spheres. These findings could one day help with things like advanced textile design or new forms of camouflage.
Let's move to our spotlight section now, and we're looking at the physical engines that are fueling digital India data centers. The growth here is just off the charts.
It is truly staggering. India's data center capacity has more than doubled since just 2019. We're at about 1.4 gigawatts now, and it's projected to hit 2 gigawatts by 2028.
And to give you a sense of scale, what does that actually look like?
Well, take Yada's new campus in Greater Noida. It's so big, it requires its own dedicated 10,000 square meter electricity substation just to power and cool the servers.
Incredible. And who is using all this power? Who is driving this demand?
It's primarily what they call the hyperscalers. So think AWS, Google, Microsoft, Meta. They account for nearly 70% of the revenue. They rent out entire floors completely locked off, often as confidential tenants.
And what's interesting is where these are being built, you'd think they'd be in the middle of tech hubs, but they're often in remote locations.
That's right, because at its core, this is a real estate and utility play. You need huge amounts of land and massive power hookups, but you don't actually need many people on site.
So states are competing for these now.
Fiercely. They're offering subsidies, they're updating building codes to be more data center friendly, things like different floor height requirements or fewer required parking spots.
But this entire boom is on a collision course with a massive power challenge, right?
Right.
Especially with AI.
This is the critical issue. A traditional cloud server rack might consume, say, 6 to 8 kilowatts of power. An AI rack, one filled with GPUs for machine learning, starts at a minimum of 50 kilowatts, and it can go up to 200 kilowatts per rack.
200. That is an astronomical jump in power density.
It's a complete game changer. And remember, in a tropical climate like India's, a huge chunk of that power goes just to cooling everything down. So as AI gets integrated, the power demands are going to multiply exponentially.
And what are the other big drivers behind this boom right now?
It's a perfect storm, really. You have huge investment commitments, like AWS planning to invest over 1 lakh crore in Maharashtra. You have the threat of data localization laws under the new DPDP Act, which makes companies want to store Indian data in India.
And a geopolitical angle, too.
Definitely. Bypassing China's restricted digital industry is a major factor. And finally, we're getting more and more undersea data cables landing on our shores, making places like Visakhapatnam suddenly very strategic.
Which means the market could be shifting.
That's the expectation. Right now, about 70% of the market is concentrated in Mumbai and Chennai. But this boom is expected to decentralize to new hubs like Vizag. The real explosion is yet to come.
For our final segment, we turn to the magazine section. First, a look at culture and Mumbai's claim to be India's art capital.
It's a strong claim. The city just has this inherent energy and motion, as the article puts it, and historically, the numbers back it up. An estimated 65% of India's art market is in Mumbai.
And it has institutional history.
It does. A deep legacy. You've got the Sir J.J. School of Art, the Progressive Artists Group, the Bhulabhai Desai Memorial Institute. The roots are there.
And the Art Mumbai Fair seems to be building on that legacy.
It's having what one gallery owner called a compounding effect. The fair itself becomes a catalyst. It drives other major exhibitions, like the recent Krishan Khanna and Thai Meta retrospectives, and it's pulling in collectors from nearby cities like Pune and Nagpur.
But the article makes a crucial point. A fair alone does not make an art capital.
No, and that's the key distinction. You can't just be a place for events like Dubai. To be a true capital, you need to strengthen your public institutions, your museums, your archives. And critically, you have to be a city where artists can actually afford to live and work.
What about the local engagement? What makes the response in Mumbai unique?
There's this sense that Mumbaikers take ownership. It's not a passive audience. They engage, they read, they study, and they acquire art.
And there's a fun detail in the article about why.
Yes, it notes that the city's construction boom means people are moving into larger apartments, and now they need to fill all that new wall space. It's a very practical driver for the market.
For our final story, we're going way back in time, tracing the evolution of a god. How the hero Vasudeva Krishna became the cosmic preserver, Vishnu.
It's a fascinating journey over 2,200 years, and you can trace it through sculpture and archaeology. The earliest evidence we have is from around 200 BCE.
What did we find?
3 key pieces. An image from Malhar in Chhattisgarh that's likely Vasudeva. It also features the earliest known woman donor in Indian art. Then you have Indo-Greek coins from Afghanistan showing both Sankarsana and Vasudeva.
Balarama and Krishna.
Exactly. Now, of course, the famous Heliodorus pillar inscription in Madhya Pradesh dedicated to Vasudeva Krishna.
So at this point, he's a powerful local hero, a deity, but not yet the cosmic god. When does that shift happen?
The transformation really takes off in the Kushan period, around 100 CE. The article calls it an artistic laboratory. Sculptors are just experimenting wildly.
Trying to figure out how to represent this abstract idea.
Yes, how do you visualize a god that the Vedas describe as striding across the universe? So they try multi-armed forms, multi-headed forms. They're trying to give a physical shape to a cosmic concept.
And when does the image finally settle into the form of Vishnu we all recognize today?
That happens by the Gupta period, around 400 CE. The form stabilizes into that calm, four-armed Vishnu holding his standard symbols. the discus, the conch, the mace, and the lotus.
And the stories in the texts helped cement that connection between the human hero and the cosmic god.
Absolutely. Texts like the Harivamsha explicitly link the mortal cowherd Krishna, the child of parents, to the immortal Vishnu. The defining story is Krishna lifting Mount Govardhana.
An act of incredible power that proved he was more than human.
It visually echoed Vishnu's 3 mythical steps across the world. It was the moment that unified the hero with the cosmic god in the popular imagination.
And there's a beautiful final detail in the art from that story.
There is. A bas-relief from Mamallapuram from around 700 CE shows Krishna raising the mountain. And in that sculpture, you find the earliest images of cows and calves in all of Indian art. It's an explicit visual reference to Goloka, the cosmic cow heaven, completing that final, beautiful link between the cowherd hero and the preserver of the universe.
Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.